According to the mainstream media, Visa hasn't been up to anything in the way of curtailing free speech, haven't been telling companies what their customers' money is allowed to be spent on. Visit YouTube or any gaming culture website, and that silence is deafening, however. Welcome to the Between the Lies podcast, your weekly lesson on how to approach an uncertain world with positivity and balance. I'm Nicky P, here with my good friends and money brains, Luke Tatum and Rob Brayton from Perfect Spiral Capital. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Nick. Thanks for having us again.
Yeah, doing really well. Happy to be here.
See, folks, I know that's all a lie. Rob may be doing good, but Luke, on the other hand, one of my favorite gaming friends, I know is not doing good and has a lot of opinions as to being told how he's allowed to spend his money.
Nick, I'm always doing good. So, there's that. I'll put that out there. But, yes, I am a gamer, and for Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Stripe, all these guys to be kind of getting in the middle of how money is spent is never a good time. This is not the first time this has happened, but certainly the most recent. We've got a whole situation. I guess let's take it in pieces. So, Nick, where would you like to start?
Well, I think the headline that I came up with, which is a not headline, says a lot in that I went looking for this because I knew it was something you'd have a lot to say. And I'm like, okay, well, the way I like to structure these episodes is find the good headline, what people are talking about. And let me tell you, YouTube's got plenty of opinions on this particular topic. But when I start perusing our normal Financial Times, the websites that we would normally go through, I wasn't seeing anything about it. It's like nothing happened. Visa never did anything different or out of the ordinary here. Just, business as usual, I guess. And, frankly, knowing what I know historically about Visa, it is kind of business as usual. I remember maybe a decade ago when they started putting pressure on Patreon accounts, the whole alt-right movement. People like Sargon of Akkad had their ability to do banking period taken away from them overnight because they held opinions that one of the governments that they were, under the scope of didn't like what they were saying. And I thought that people had made it pretty clear that we really weren't about people telling us how to spend our money. But apparently we weren't clear enough, and, they're going to continue on with it. And at the same time, we were talking last week about CBDCs and the fear of them. And, we kind of make the joke about the Canadian truckers, but here we are yet again with all of the things that people are afraid of with the CBDCs. They're already here at our front door. What's the point in the CBDCs if they can already do that? So why don't you, obviously you're a person who's been affected by this. Why don't we start there for you?
Yeah, sure. The basic lay of the land, right, is Steam, which is the biggest place for PC gaming, right? It's where people it's a digital download service run by Valve Corporation, and they have been told by their payment processing partners, I guess let's say, that they need to delist or remove a lot of games from their store. And this also happened to itch.io, which I've never even been on that website, I don't think. But, lots and lots and lots of games have been removed from these services. Now, the push is coming from this primarily an activist group out of Australia called Collective Shout. And they're saying, hey, this is showing, children in vulnerable situations, there's violence against children, there's, sexual content, it's not artistic, it's just sexual, these kind of arguments. But a lot of games that you would never think would fall under that sort of an umbrella have also been removed and also been affected. And there's a lot of finger pointing from these different groups about whose fault it actually is. Valve Corporation is saying, well, we've been told we need to remove these games, and so we had to, and they updated their subscriber agreement. But then MasterCard, who has been named by Valve as being responsible, is saying, oh, we didn't do that. And so in the middle, between MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, and the game distribution platforms are banks. And so the banks are saying, well, we didn't do it. And they point to the credit cards. The credit cards say, well, we didn't do it. And they point to the banks. Right. And so there's this whole muddy water, gray area, but you're violating our terms of service kind of a thing going on. But people who are making games, and I don't play adult games, okay, but like people who are playing games that are unfairly being targeted by this are being affected in a big way. And people who make those games, like say an artistic game, there's a game called Last Call, which is, I believe, about alcoholism, something like that. And it's like about recovering from alcoholism that's been removed from Steam. That is not. Why is that being affected? Um, it's a blanket thing.
It's interesting to me that like the pushback is coming at like the terms of service level, as opposed to why is the way our money functions handled by a private entity with the ability to do this entirely at all? Why isn't any entity working as an intermediary with our finance? Why don't we have something like, say, I don't know, Bitcoin, which doesn't have these same issues? The money moves because money moves. There's no one to tell it can't. You have the freedom to spend your money at will. To me, that's a perk of the system. I think other people might see that as a bit of a bug in their system.
Right. That's an excellent question. And I think we could easily do a 6-hour long podcast about why do we have these third parties in the middle of all this. But Rob, I mean, before the show started, we were talking about firearms being affected in this way in the past, and Nick, you mentioned some prior issues, things like uh, Patreon.
Yeah, it's Sargon of Akkad getting kicked off Patreon years ago. Rob, to go into a little bit greater detail on like the gun situation, because I vaguely remember that happening, but I don't remember the scope in which that happened.
Yeah, I don't recall all the specific details in that situation, but I know there was a lot of payment processors and or financial institutions that didn't want their funds going through to purchase firearms in some way, shape, or form. So it was essentially saying, you as the person who wants to make the purchase, you're relegated to a cash purchase to buy a firearm. And meaning you can't conduct commerce cross border if you wanted something that was even remotely firearms related. So let's say I wanted to buy a sling for a rifle. They might say, no, I can't buy that because it's related to a firearm. So that's some of the stuff that was occurring at that time, if I recall correctly. And that's not really any different than what we're seeing here. And, as someone who's sort of outside the gaming culture, I this is new to me, but it's also not new because this is the same MO of what we've seen before in trying to dictate who gets what funds and whether or not they're allowed to get them. And that I don't think that that's really the way that free market is intended to operate, right? Free market says if I have a product that works well and people want to buy it, then they should be able to buy it. If it doesn't work well, then people are going to avoid it. And that's really how it should operate. And people are free to create any protest that they want against it, but shutting down the payment vehicle for it, that shouldn't be allowed in my opinion. I think you should be allowed to do it. You just educate other people about it. If you don't like what the product is and what it is, that's up to you. You can do that. That's what, all of our freedoms should allow us to do. But when we're clamping down and preventing the payment from even taking place, well, that's a different story, right? Like I don't agree with that. That's like saying, well, your money's no good because we said so. Like that's not right.
It reminds me a little bit of some of these things um, that have happened in the past, not just firearms, but but a lot of different situations that have cropped up, I mean, just in my adult life, where we're saying that something is way worse, even though there's already a different law against it. It's like murder is wrong, but a hate crime murder is like way worse, for example. And it's like, well, how do you know it was a hate crime? Like, I mean, what does that even mean? There's some extra like layers to that. It just sort of creates this sort of confusion. And so,
Well,
okay,
it creates a way to double punish, is what it really does. But
right. But it's like, okay, buying a firearm, let's say we're discouraging buying a firearm, right? Well, okay, buying a firearm is bad, but buying a firearm and using a Visa card is, well, you just can't have that at all. Like you would have to pay in this alternative way. It's like I don't know. It's creating a two-tiered system. You know, it's very strange to me.
well, it's funny. It's the banking class will say, saying, well, you're subject to our morality. You don't get to live in the world you choose because your money is only allowed to be spent the way we tell you it's allowed to be spent, which is frankly a pretty grim picture of where things are and where they're headed. But getting here to have a sewing circle and gripe about the day is not what we get here to do. We're actually here to paint a different picture for people. So why don't you give us give us the white pill, as it would be. Give us some way to look at things, a way to get around this, or what you think the hope that we have is.
I think that there already is a large reaction kind of to the other direction, like the pendulum is swinging back the other direction. With the firearms stuff in the past, you had Walmart, Dick's Sporting Goods, some stores like that permanently changed their policies. They never really got changed back. And so, there were some lasting impacts of that, but they're easy enough to navigate now. I mean, you can still purchase firearms and you can use Visa and MasterCard payment processing to do that. And so I think you just have public pushback. There's a period of uncertainty here. There's, things will settle back down and things will get back to normal or more or less normal. But I think the silver lining with something like this is that there's some awareness and that people are seeing how this can be, games that feature certain topics today, and then tomorrow it can be games that feature those topics plus this additional list. And then next year plus this additional list. And so, you're going to have some significant public awareness, I think, come out of this that will maybe lead to some swing back in the other direction. Um, Not to mention, thankfully, we still have cash. You can still pay in alternative ways for certain things.
Well, Bitcoin and other things. What we're getting at silver lining wise is that this used to be a real easy thing for them to hide from people than when it was happening, unless you were part of a particular subset of people that happened to be impacted by it. Majority of people didn't know. That the old model of let's just not talk about it in the papers, no one will know what's going on. Well, the fact that I can go to YouTube and it's comical how much is on YouTube about this versus in the classic media. You can't shut this up because we're not going to let you shut it up. We're going to be as loud as we need to be to draw attention to it, and the fact that that's still an option that they haven't been able to completely get rid of speaks for itself, I think.
Right. Another thing we haven't talked about, just sort of a random point, but an interesting factor in all this is that was instantly a huge campaign to call these payment processors, Visa and MasterCard, and get on the phone with the customer service rep and tell them that you have questions about this and get them to try to clarify their position on what's going on and why and what you can do about it and those sorts of things. And so to the point that it's completely overwhelmed their customer service department. Hours and hours and hours of hold time. They're reciting a script and hanging up on people. Now, is that absolutely miserable for the customer service reps? Yeah, you bet. I don't want that job. Okay. But is it showing feedback from the wider community, yeah, absolutely it is. They can only handle so many people quitting their customer service jobs, right? Um, so, it gets to a point where they have to respond in an alternative way. They can't just hardline an issue like this forever. Gamers get real upset about stuff. I don't know if anyone else knows that, but
I'm just thinking back to the GameStop thing.
yeah. So anyway, like I say, that's kind of a random point, but um, unbelievable what people have been doing to these card processors.
It's good to hear. Rob, any last thoughts that you have on the matter?
I will say that, just prior to this episode, I did take a quick peek to see if Visa or Master had mentioned anything. MasterCard has issued a statement on their website, but obviously they're distancing themselves from it, right? So they were trying to say, like you brought up in the very beginning, that, well, it wasn't us. Well, it's coming from somewhere. So who is it? Maybe they don't know. But if they don't know, then they might want to find out, because it is impacting their business, especially if it's overwhelming their customer service staff. So I that's an interesting way to sort of retaliate, and in a positive way, right? I think there's good things that come from taking action when you disagree with a topic. Now, I'll say, like, from the outside, while I certainly have a perspective of, some of these games, do I think they should be made? Like, morally speaking, I disagree with them, but that doesn't mean they should that somebody should shut down just because one group doesn't like what they are, where they come from. That's not my decision to make.
I did not. I did not sign up so that your morality can dictate my morality.
Exactly. And I agree that everybody has their right to do that. And
Look, I'm going to tell everyone that we need to start a world where Rob is forced to take a ladyboy home and like let him live in a basement or something.
no way.
And you know what? I don't play a lot of racing games, so I think we should ban those. And yeah,
So I do, just because you guys are the money brains. I do want to ask a question that said, so one of the things that it does really make me have questions about is, I brought it up a little bit in the beginning, in that why are we having private entities have this much control over money? And part of the issue is that the way that our money functions via the SWIFT system is so terrible that we had to have a second layer authority come in to handle the way we process payments. Because could you do a little bit of an explainer for, like, maybe the people that are not, who are confused by the fact that I just said SWIFT system, as to what that is, and what does the second layer technology mean?
Rob, I don't know. You're kind of the in-house expert on this sort of stuff. You know more than even I do.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say that I'm super familiar with the whole Swift access as far as, like, how payments operate, but I do know that when you think about how to get around some of that stuff, I think anytime you can operate in a more privatized system that isn't running through the public channels does help insulate a person from those situations and that extra oversight, so to speak. I know, like, we have options like what we work with our clients, where they can operate in a very private system, and it's between two parties. And if you wanted to convert that to cash, and then you can, you know, conduct your business that way, in a very private way, that's very possible.
Well, the idea is that, like, with the SWIFT system, SWIFT is how checks will move. It's why, like, anytime you do something that's check based, it takes forever for it to clear. And it's like, okay, I did this thing, and now I'm waiting 3 weeks to find out if it actually ever went through. Whereas what Visa and MasterCard did is basically they put themselves on the line for the loan, and they square everything up later with SWIFT. The idea is, okay, well, we'll say we can see this in your bank account now, so, we're giving you the benefit of the doubt that it's there, so that you can boom, you have that transaction happen and technically be cleared as far as you're concerned. But it's not really cleared until the SWIFT system catches back up to it. But why does that technology have to exist there in the first place? They've done such a terrible job that somebody had to step and say, like, we can't do international commerce when everything takes weeks and months to get through.
Right. I mean, you've got there's layers and layers to this. That's not even necessarily a end of the show sort of conversation, to be totally honest, right? Because we're gonna have to go through a whole lot to explain all that. But you've got the fact that we've got a debt-based currency. You got the fact that there's money being created out of thin air every time these major institutions are doing things, such as issuing loans. I mean, you look at there shouldn't be a lot of different metrics that you could look at to determine the total money supply, and yet there are. It's like, well, what counts as money? What what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like, how is that a question? It either is money or isn't. And so that's an onion, man, to really pull all that apart.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because, as we're talking about why is this necessary? And the necessary is because the base product that we're given as far as handling money in general is such a poor product that a private entity had to step in and make it better. And now the issue is we have a private entity that, with monopolistic power is kind of doing what it's doing.
Right, and being pressured by activist groups, like, what does an activist group have? Why is it even an open question that an activist group should have an opinion about what a bank processor handles? Like, if you're a payment processor, you process payments. That's your job, you know? Whose payment is it? I don't care, right? I mean,
That's the way I think. All right. Is there any last things we want to get in here, gentlemen, before let people go for the day and go back to living their best lives?
I think we covered all the high points on this one. I'm, you know, obviously personally going to be eagerly following this and seeing kind of what comes of it. Steam, Valve in particular, has been really, really good with previous backlash campaigns and things like that. So we'll see where that ends up. Who knows? Maybe we do another episode about it. But I'm just excited to see where it goes from here, because where it is right now is not all that great.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how effective some of those campaigns are, right? At pushing back on some of these platforms. Does it cause the potential for larger scale change? I mean, there's a lot of people that do gaming, a lot. So if you can generate a sense of unity, that maybe the upside here is it's an opportunity for gamers of all types to bond together and force real change within the industry. I mean, that's something that could be done. And that's more of that whole white pill we were talking about before. And I think that is an opportunity to create real change within a network. So yeah, I would say that would be the plus side to maybe take from a negative situation like this going forward.
Right on. Well, Luke, why don't you tell them where they can find out more about Perfect Spiral Capital and you, gentlemen?
Sure. Yeah. If you're like-minded, if you like what we have to say, if you'd like to get further into questions of money in your own personal and business life, come check us out at perfectspiralcapital.com. You can book a meeting with myself, with Rob. We will be happy to evaluate your situation, see what we can show you in the ways of managing your personal finances and planning for the future, so that you can do what you want to do and you're not beholden to some of these other companies. Perfectspiralcapital.com /booking will be our direct booking link.
Yeah,
Right
there's a lot
on.
of great educational resources there too to check out as well. So
Got my book, we've got video courses, we got all kinds of stuff up there.